Welcome to Books. We bring you a variety of audiobook novels, ranging from thrilling suspense to sci-fi adventures. Whether you're commuting, enjoying some leisure time, or winding down before bedtime, Open Books is here to accompany you. As university professor Paul drove home in the twilight, a familiar car flashed before his eyes, the blurred silhouette of his colleague Kenneth visible through the window. His curiosity piqued. He couldn't help but wonder about Kenneth's whereabouts. In the pitch-black night, he decided to follow Kenneth, so Paul gently pressed the accelerator, trailing behind. He followed Kenneth's car along dark paths and winding roads until it stopped at a desolate place. Paul parked his car at a distance, hiding in the darkness, secretly observing Kenneth's every move. Kenneth got out of the car, seemingly looking around to ensure no one was nearby. Then he opened the trunk, revealing filled black plastic bags. Paul's heart sank. He couldn't believe Kenneth would do such a thing. He widened his eyes, trying hard to conceal himself in the darkness while keeping as much distance as possible. Kenneth carried those black plastic bags, step by step, towards a desolate grassland. When Kenneth opened the black plastic bags, Paul almost couldn't help but gasp. The bags contained not household garbage but two nauseating corpses. A putrid smell hit him, making him almost want to vomit. How is this possible? Paul's lips trembled, trying to suppress his fear and astonishment. He watched Kenneth's every move attentively, afraid to miss any detail. At that moment, Kenneth suddenly stopped, as if sensing something amiss around him. Paul's heart almost leaped out of his throat. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. However, just when he thought Kenneth had noticed his presence, Kenneth suddenly turned and started walking towards him. "Who's there? Come out." Kenneth's voice was low and indifferent, filled with warning. Paul felt an indescribable fear, but he wasn't going to give up easily. He took a deep breath, quickly stood up, his face displaying a determined expression. "Kenneth, you can't do this." Paul's voice trembled, but he still tried to show strength and determination. "You have to explain to the police." A wild gleam flashed in Kenneth's eyes as he cautiously scrutinized Paul, as if considering what to do with him. However, just when Paul thought he was about to face death, the sound of a police car suddenly came from afar. "Damn it!" Kenneth cursed and then ran off. When the red and blue lights of the police car flashed and the siren wailed, Paul felt a deep sense of relief. He lay on the street, blood staining his hair, his heart pulsating. This night had nearly taken his life, almost erasing him from this world. "Are you all right?" The police officers rushed over, asking with concern. Their voices echoed in Paul's ears, as if from a distant place. Paul struggled to nod. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He felt a wave of dizziness, a surge of nausea. But he also felt he was still alive. The police officers lifted Paul into the ambulance, hastily rushing him to the hospital. There, doctors treated his wounds with professional care, stitching them up, stopping the bleeding. However, even though the surface wounds were treated, the deep wounds inside couldn't be easily repaired. 8 months later, Paul still found himself deeply entrenched in the shadows of that night. His daily life was filled with endless fear and anxiety. Every nightfall, his heart felt like it was being cut by an invisible knife, blood flowing continuously. "Paul, you need to see a doctor," Charlotte said to him, her eyes filled with worry. "I'm fine, dear." Paul tried to reassure her with a weak smile, but he knew it meant nothing. Yet, even in such circumstances, Paul continued to strive. He tried to distract himself through work, attempting to keep himself busy. But no matter how hard he tried, The image of that night still lingered in his mind. "Dad, you can do it," his son said to him, his eyes filled with innocence and concern. "I will, son." Paul patted his son's head, forcing a smile. However, despite the support of his family, Paul still felt lonely and hopeless. He felt as if he were trapped in an invisible cage, unable to escape. In such a situation, Charlotte decided to take action. She began actively seeking help, trying to help Paul out of the darkness. She took him to see a psychologist, seeking professional advice and assistance. She accompanied him through every difficult moment, giving him endless love and support. Gradually, Paul began to slowly emerge from the shadows. Although the trauma of that night could never completely disappear, at least he learned how to face it, how to deal with it. He began to rediscover the meaning of life, rediscovering himself. "Thank you, dear." Paul hugged Charlotte tightly, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. "I'll always be by your side, Paul," Charlotte said gently. As night fell and the room was enveloped in dim light, Paul sat at his desk, anxiously staring at the antique typewriter placed upon it. Its lines were quaint, the letters on its keyboard neatly arranged, as if harboring some ancient wisdom. Charlotte stood at the doorway, watching him with concern. "Paul, you seem a bit tense. Still thinking about that thing?" Charlotte asked softly, her gaze filled with care. Paul sighed wryly and shook his head, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "Maybe I'm just overthinking, but whenever I see this typewriter, I can't shake this strange unease," he murmured. Charlotte stepped into the room, gently patting his shoulder. "Maybe you're just under a lot of pressure and need to unwind. Why not try writing something? The typewriter is here to inspire you." Paul nodded, taking a blank sheet of paper, ready to start writing. He pondered how his fingers should dance across the keyboard of the antique typewriter, but as he approached it, he suddenly felt a nameless fear. He could hear the sounds of those keystrokes, clear and jarring, as if some invisible hand was pressing down those ancient keys. He tried to ignore the noises, focusing on his writing. However, each time his fingers touched the keyboard, he felt a tremor. His heart raced, sweat beading on his forehead, as he struggled against this unseen pressure. "What's wrong?" Charlotte asked with concern, her brow furrowed. "I don't know. Maybe it's just my imagination." Paul forced a weak smile, then resumed his writing. Time passed, and Paul struggled to overcome his inner fear, striving to concentrate on his work. Yet, just when he thought he had conquered the fear, those strange sounds would resurface, disrupting his focus. He felt trapped in an inescapable nightmare, no matter how hard he tried, unable to shake off the oppressive feeling. "Maybe I should give up." Paul weakly set down his pen, feeling deeply defeated. Charlotte walked over, gently taking his hand. "No, you can't give up. You're strong. You can overcome this," her voice brimming with confidence and encouragement. Paul nodded, taking a deep breath, steeling himself to resume writing. He knew it wouldn't be an easy road, but he was determined to conquer the fear within him. Paul sat in his study, furrowing his brows as he read through the newspaper. His eyes were fixed on an article detailing the double homicide case. Outside the window, the trees swayed gently, bathed in moonlight, casting dappled shadows on the ground. "Paul, what are you looking at?" Charlotte entered the study, curiosity laced with concern in her voice. "It's about that murder case. I've always felt Kenneth wasn't the only culprit, that there's more to it than meets the eye." Paul handed the newspaper to Charlotte, who frowned deeply. "You mean that night?" Charlotte asked, her voice tinged with apprehension, vividly recalling how Paul had narrowly escaped death at Kenneth's hands. Yes, I've always felt there's some connection between that antique typewriter and Kenneth. Perhaps I should reinvestigate the events of that night, see if I can uncover some clues. Determination flickered in Paul's eyes as he resolved to unearth a corner of the truth. Charlotte furrowed her brow in thought for a moment before nodding. I support you, Paul. But you need to be careful. This could be a dangerous path. Paul smiled faintly, gratefully squeezing Charlotte's hand. Thank you, dear. I'll be careful. And so, Paul embarked on his investigative journey. He reviewed every detail of that fateful night, trying to unearth any possible leads. He meticulously examined Kenneth's background, exchanged ideas with the police, and attempted to reconstruct the scene of the crime. Throughout the investigation, Paul encountered many obstacles and challenges. Some people were unwilling to cooperate, and some leads seemed to go nowhere. However, he persisted, believing that the truth was within reach, and that as long as he persevered, he would find the answers. As night fell, Paul sat alone in his study, poring over a report about Kenneth. Suddenly, his eyes lingered on a name, one he hadn't noticed before: Allison Moore. Allison Moore. Paul muttered to himself, remembering the mention of this name in Kenneth's statement, unaware of its significance at the time. Now, it filled him with questions. He quickly searched for information about Allison Moore and discovered she was a woman who had been in contact with Kenneth, allegedly involved in some emotional entanglement with him. This revelation sparked something within Paul. He felt he had stumbled upon a crucial lead. The next morning, Paul rushed to the police station, sharing his discovery with the authorities. They were shocked by this new lead and immediately launched an investigation to locate Allison Moore. During the investigation, they uncovered key evidence, revealing a shocking truth: Allison Moore was, in fact, one of the main perpetrators of the murder case. She and Kenneth had conspired to kill two innocent people, then attempted to cover up their crimes. Paul furrowed his brow as he sat at his desk, filled with perplexity and anxiety. Holding a thick investigative report detailing Kenneth's background and past crimes, Paul couldn't shake off the shadow in his mind, despite the sunlight streaming in through the window. Charlotte entered the room and immediately recognized the gravity of Paul's expression. "Paul, what's wrong? You look really troubled." Paul looked up at her, his face filled with dismay. "Charlotte, I've discovered something shocking. Kenneth isn't just what we thought he was. He's a serial killer with multiple similar offenses in his past." Charlotte's face turned pale as she covered her mouth with her hands, seemingly unable to believe what she was hearing. This is horrifying. How could we have not noticed? I don't know. But there's something even more concerning. Paul furrowed his brow and handed the report to Charlotte. "Take a look at this." Charlotte took the report, quickly scanning its contents. Her brows furrowed tightly as she came across a chilling fact. The antique typewriter left by Kenneth was a clue to his next target. This is too terrifying." Charlotte trembled, feeling a chill creeping up from her feet. Paul nodded, his face filled with worry and anxiety. "We need to take action immediately. If Kenneth is planning to strike his next target, we can't afford to sit back. I'll contact the authorities right away and inform them of our findings." Charlotte grasped Paul's hand, her eyes filled with determination. "We have to do something. We can't let more people get hurt." Gratefully, Paul looked at Charlotte and then picked up the phone, dialing the police. He hastily relayed their discovery, hoping they would take swift action. Shortly after, the authorities arrived at Kenneth's potential hideout. After a thorough search, they found evidence of Kenneth planning to attack his next target. They swiftly arrested him and took him back to prison. In the end, Kenneth was sentenced to life imprisonment, receiving the punishment he deserved. Paul and Charlotte found peace and tranquility in their lives again, but they would never forget this harrowing experience. If you enjoyed today's story, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share it with your friends. Your support is the driving force behind our continuous creative journey. Look forward to the next episode, where more exciting stories await you at Open Books. Thank you all for tuning in, and until next time, goodbye.